Hello, and welcome to What on Earth, the podcast of the Environmental Investigation Agency, or EIA. Growing up to just 150 centimetres in length, the vaquita porpoise is the smallest of all living cetaceans, and, with an estimated population of just 10 individuals left alive, it's also the world's most endangered marine mammal. The vaquita isn't even being directly poached. It's the victim of collateral damage, left teetering on the brink of extinction due to being caught in illegal gill nets, which are set to catch also endangered totoaba fish in Mexico's Gulf of California. EIA's recent report, On Borrowed Time, warned that burgeoning online trade in dried totoaba swim bladders, also known as more, could sound the death knell for the vaquita. I'm Paul Newman, EIA's Senior Press and Communications Officer, and today I'm joined by Senior Ocean Campaigner Sarah Dolman to discuss the findings of the report. And we're particularly pleased to welcome special guest Lorenzo Rojas-Bracho, an internationally recognised authority on vaquitas who sits on the cetacean specialist group of the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Sarah, Lorenzo, welcome, and thanks very much for taking the time to share your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
Lorenzo, perhaps you could start us off by telling our listeners a little more about the vaquita itself, your work to understand and protect them, and how they've come to be so imperiled.
Yeah, the vaquita is probably the smallest cetacean in the world. It's about 1.5 meters long in average. Females are a bit larger than males. And they have a wide variety of preys, about 21 or 22. So that is a good adaptation because if anything happens to the ecosystem, they have a menu to choose from to prey. They produce a calf, we thought every other year, but recent research we did, it seems they can produce a calf not every other year, but every year. And the pregnancy time is about 11 months. So it's a slow breeder in a way. And it's endangered because it's killed incidentally in gill nets where it drowns. And it's a very shy animal. And we have only one report of a fisherman that was able to see from his boat how the animal drowned. And he said the animal just touched a little bit the gill net and really got nervous and started turning around itself. And then it got entangled. So they are very sensitive to this, it seems, and they're easy to get bycaught in any type of gill nets that are used in the upper Gulf of California.
And can I ask, how long have these gill nets been an issue in the vaquita's range?
Well, it started really the problem after World War II, when nylon started to be used more and more in many issues we use today, but especially in gill nets. So we have no account of how many vaquitas there were in the past, how much their distribution area extended. So we really started learning about vaquita in the 70s, probably. And but we think they've been bycaught for decades. But we have no really good evidence, like in the UK, that you have followed strandings of porpoises or things like that for centuries. We are newer for those things here.
I guess the data simply hasn't been recorded. If it's incidental catches by fishermen in recent decades, then it won't have been logged.
Yeah, and also the upper Gulf of California, the fishing communities developed there because of the totoaba. So before totoaba, fishing was minimum in that area. But as totoaba was discovered by Americans and their breeding grounds in the upper Gulf of California. So that was an attraction for the Chinese communities in the US mainly, although we had some Chinese communities. And fishermen following the migration of the totoaba is how they got to the upper Gulf. And then probably that's what started vaquita bycatch really heavily, probably in the 60s or so.
So Sarah, if I could bring you in here, as I mentioned at the outset, vaquita are dying in nets which are set to catch the totoaba fish. But where is the demand for totoaba more actually coming from, and why is it so highly valued on the black market?
So, moor is a commonly used name for the swim bladder of the fish, and large moors in species like totoaba, who can grow for about 2 meters in length, are highly prized in parts of China, where the demand appears to have increased dramatically in the last 20 years or so. And the totoaba moors are considered by those who buy them to be a symbol of great wealth. So they're required for investment and they're prized for their apparent but unproven medicinal value. So the trade in totoaba moors has been illegal since the 1970s when the fish was listed on the CITES appendices. And the moor trade is transnational. So the moors are removed from totoaba that are illegally fished in the Gulf of California in Mexico, and then the moors, which are mostly dried, are trafficked through seaports and airports, often through intermediary countries such as the United States and other Asian countries. And then they mostly end up in China, which has the majority of the totoaba moor market. Although our recent research has documented increasing markets in other Asian countries such as Malaysia, which is obviously concerning.
And in terms of its actual use, are the dried swim bladders primarily used to make, I don't know, soups or foods, or are they used as an ingredient in traditional Chinese remedies?
Some of the smaller swim bladders are used in soups, we believe, believed to have medicinal benefits, but the larger, bigger moors are very much prized and often given as gifts, traditionally at weddings and big ceremonial practices. It's my understanding.
So it's regarded as like a high status thing to invest in, and as a very lucrative thing, obviously, to invest in as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Could you tell us something about the scale of the fish and wall trade that's been pushing the vaquita so close to extinction in recent years?
Yeah, sure. So EIA has done a lot of work on this issue. Our investigations began a decade ago. Several on the ground surveys of fish moor retailers were conducted in China, and the field surveys revealed hotspots of totoaba moor sales in several Chinese cities in the south of China. We identified a number of shops that openly sold totoaba moors despite the trade being illegal. One trader in particular claimed to have as many as 700 totoaba moors in stock. We also monitor social media platforms and e-commerce websites and systematically record data on the trade. So details such as the size of the moors that are available, the price, and those who are advertising them. And our research shows that totoaba moors continue to be advertised on Facebook and WeChat, and particularly on other Chinese social media platforms such as the Chinese versions of TikTok and Instagram. And in our latest report, which was released last month, we found and reported that there were 5 times as many adverts on WeChat last year in 2023 than there were in 2022, for example. So I'm sad to say that the industry really is thriving. On a more positive note, based on the leads that were provided by EIA to the Chinese authorities following our earlier investigation, the Chinese authorities set about an operation in 2018 that led to the arrest of 16 individuals who were involved in totoaba moor smuggling. More than 2,500 pieces of moor were seized, and 11 of the suspects were brought to court for trial. The gang leader in that case was suspected of smuggling almost 16,000 pieces of moor since 2015, with a potential value of more than 100 million US dollars.
Wow, that's an incredible amount. Um, One of the things that was in the report, I believe, was that you've remarked on the volume of trade that's happening online, and you just touched on that now with advertisements on things like WeChat and Facebook. But I gather the findings of the report also indicate that despite that ongoing trade, that the actual number of seizures are generally reducing. Can you tell us what this means and where it's happening and at what sort of scale?
Sure. So the seizure records that are held in EIA's Global Environmental Crime Tracker, which you can access on our website, show that totoaba have been seized at seaports and airports in Hong Kong, Thailand, the United States, and Vietnam since 2020. And whilst we've got records of 15 seizures taking place in 2020 and 13 seizures in 2021, we only have records for 3 seizures in 2022 and 3 more in 2023. So it would appear that the seizure levels are down in the last 2 years, which is concerning given the high level of online availability of totoaba moors. And some of those seizures have been noteworthy, so I'll just describe a couple of them. Last year, US Customs officers oversaw a seizure of moors in the port of Nogales in Arizona. And this is a busy port that borders with Mexico. And the seizure included 270 totoaba moors with an estimated value of 2.7 million US dollars. And the moors were found concealed in a shipment of frozen fish fillets, which is quite a common way for moors to be transported. They often appear to be hidden in a shipment of other products. And this was thought to be the second largest seizure of its kind in the US. And similarly, back in 2020, Hong Kong Customs made a large seizure of fresh totoaba moors worth 3.2 million US dollars. So another really big seizure. It's less common to come across fresh moors. They're more typically transported dried. And this was Hong Kong's first seizure involving fresh moors, and it was also their largest ever seizure. So in addition to these large seizures in countries which are known trade routes, we have found in our research there are emerging markets in or trade routes through both Thailand and Vietnam, which is worrying.
So, is there anything we can read into the apparent fall in the number of seizures? Is this because the traffickers are getting smarter and rerouting what they're doing, or is it that the authorities have taken their eye off the ball somewhat?
Well, I certainly hope that the latter isn't the case. We do believe that the traffickers are rerouting, and of course, enforcement activities can only ever investigate a small percentage of what's coming through airports and seaports. And so I think it's probably a combination of both.
Okay. Now, obviously, we've been working on totoaba for some years now, and have year on year reported their numbers falling, unfortunately, although they seem to have stabilized at an estimated 10 in the last few years. Lorenzo, can you tell us something about the efforts that have been made to date to safeguard the remaining vaquita population?
Yeah, one important thing to mention here, vaquita is about the same size of a totoaba. So the mesh size of a net is about the size of a vaquita. So that's why it's a very deadly gill net for vaquitas, but there are other gill nets that also kill vaquitas. And recently we had, last year, we started to have meetings with the Mexican Navy to discuss an option they were thinking to deploy in the vaquita. Well, it is called a zero tolerance area. This is the area where we have most of the vaquita detections and acoustic detections and sightings. Doesn't mean it's the only area where they are, but that's where they are more concentrated. And the Navy was planning to deploy there or throw into the ocean big blocks of concrete as a deterrent to gill netters. And during the meetings we had, we told the Navy this is a very soft sea bottom, so if you just throw something in there, it will sink. And through discussions, we came with the idea of having large rods with hooks. And so they deployed 193, I think, the Navy of those. And it has been good news because the amount of gill netting inside the zero tolerance area, where you have all these anti-gillnet devices has been reduced 99%.
99.
It's fantastic news.
Yeah, that's
Now,
incredible.
it's really incredible, but it's important to have in mind, and we're writing a paper right now, that even though that's the best news probably we ever had in my 40 years of working with vaquita, that will not save the species. I mean, you need to stop gillnetting all over the vaquita habitat in the upper Gulf of California. And again, this is good news, but the government has to work towards eliminating gillnets. And to eliminate gillnets, you have to develop alternative fishing gear, because fishermen need to fish and they need to bring food to their table. And that's the main failure in the Mexican government. I mean, there are others, but probably the main one is they've been unable to come with alternative fishing gear to eliminate gillnets and reduce bycatch to zero. But that's I think the best news so far. And now they're extending the area with these concrete blocks and hooks. We don't have the full data how far, but they are going to, I think, deploy. I'm not so sure, but about 400 more.
And does the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, otherwise known as CITES, has that been active in measures to safeguard the vaquita?
One important thing is that there are many multilateral bodies that have made recommendations to the Mexican government to eliminate bycatch of vaquitas, mainly the International Whaling Commission or IUCN, but they don't have teeth. And the only one that may put sanctions to the Mexican government is CITES. And well, there's a bilateral and trilateral agreements between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S., and some others only Mexico, U.S., that could also have sanctions to Mexico. And what we have seen is Mexico never responded to, that's not fair to say. They didn't respond the way they should have responded to prevent vaquita population to collapse. It's only when international pressure got very intense with CITES and the trilateral agreement between Mexico, U.S., Canada, that can bring sanctions to Mexico. And then there's a bilateral agreement from the U.S. and Mexico that can also bring economic sanctions. It's when the government started doing their job. So I think those things are very important. Now, CITES, in a way, has had an interest, but has failed to push the Mexican government more, I think. They could have done more, in my opinion. But I think we did an analysis. Mexico gave the CITES a report of the actions to conserve vaquita. And I think the main failures of that report that the government of Mexico gave to CITES is that gillnets continue to be used. And according to Mexican law, they should be eliminated in the upper Gulf. And they've been used extensively to harvest fish and shrimp. So, and again, that's except in the zero tolerance area. And because of that, that's a consequence, because there's been no progress to transition from gillnets to alternative fishing gear. And there are alternative gear off the shelf that need to be tested in situ in the upper Gulf. And that has been the failure by the fisheries authorities. So as long as the enforcement and conservation actions are limited to the zero tolerance area, it will be hard to recover vaquita and have a sustainable fishery of totoaba at some point, if that's happening. Now, one of the reasons we're not able to monitor vaquita population in other areas is because it remains compromised in fishing activities. So when you are out with a boat, you have tons of gill nets that you cannot have your boat doing. You get some aggressive fishers. So as long as even there are gill nets around, then you cannot test alternative gear, and it's very hard to monitor the vaquita population. So I think, to me, that's the main issue we need to solve. And let me say, this is a cascade effect. So if there's no alternative fishing gear, then fishers cannot bring food to their families. If fishers cannot bring food to the families, fishers are forced to use gill nets. If fishers use gill nets, then the Navy cannot enforce as they should do. It's outside the zero tolerance area. And when that happens, then illegal fishing ramps, then vaquita will not recover, and Mexico will be facing these international consequences. So if Mexican fisheries authorities are unable to come with alternative fishing gear, they should hire experts that we have identified in Europe, in Canada, in Mexico, to develop this alternative gear and implement it jointly with the fishermen. The fishermen have to be part of these development, and it has to be transparent and well-funded, because so far we have no idea what the fisheries authorities are testing as alternative gear. And there's a big list of alternative gear in that report from Mexican societies, and none of them, as far as I know, and I've talked to many fishermen, they have never been tested. So I think that's the original sin, and as long as that is not solved, it's going to be very hard to recover vaquita.
When you mention alternative fishing gear that's kind of in development, do you mean it's like being invented now as we're speaking, or is it alternative means that have yet to be properly tested?
Yeah, so probably 20 years ago, we proposed the Mexican government through the International Committee for the Recovery of Vaquita to create something like the International Recovery Team, but of experts in technology. And this group was called ECOFT, Experts in Fisheries Technologies. And we had people from Denmark, Sweden, UK, United States, Canada, and Mexico. And they developed alternative fishing gear, or they adapted gear that it was already being used to the conditions of the upper Gulf. The upper Gulf is a difficult area. Currents are very strong. The tide might be 8 to 10 meters differences. So you need gear that it can work in those conditions. And gill nets are ideally suited for those kind of conditions. So it's an easy task. But they have developed a small trawler that you can, these are the boats used by fishermen. There are outboard motors about 8 to 10 meters long, fiberglass, we call them pangas. So you need to also modify a bit some of these artisanal fishing vessels. But the gear has been tested in Newfoundland University, some of the gear that has been adapted or designed, and they have a fume tank there at Newfoundland University where you can mimic the currents, the speed of the currents, the tides. And they tested several gear, and it works. And the conclusion of that group of experts said, you just have to bring those gears to the upper Gulf and polish them, test them with the fishers. And not only that, fishers were present in the Newfoundland University when those gear was tested. So we know that if the fisheries authorities or the government of Mexico will invest in that and take it seriously to develop alternative fishing gear and work jointly with fishermen, I think we would. If that had been done years ago, even if the totoaba market had increased or exploded in the last 10 years, we would be in a better position than we are now.
Yeah, I guess it's a matter of hearts and minds. If you need to get the fishers on board with any alternative practices that you're trying to advance.
Yeah, there's no way any conservation action will work if you don't work with the communities. In a good sense, because you don't have alternative gear. The only thing that the Mexico does right now is top-down measures, which really translate to enforcement. And you cannot enforce that area when you get prices, as Sarah was describing. I think one of the EIA reports in an auction, it was $100,000 for a kilogram of swim bladder or something on those lines. And
it's just too lucrative to let go.
Sorry?
It's just too lucrative to let go.
Yeah. It's the price of swim bladder is higher than many of the drugs that are in the market, in the black markets.
Yeah, I'm right in thinking a few years ago it had the nickname in the Western media of cocaine of the sea.
Yeah,
because it was actually outstripping cocaine in prices.
So as long as there is so much money there, and fishermen tell you different prices, but one fisherman that I know, and I'm assuming he's telling me the truth, he told me that the largest totoaba he got 10,000 US dollars for the kilogram of swim bladder for a Chinese buyer in the Gulf. So that swim bladder must have gone to China and elsewhere, and the prices would have been increased. I mean, if the fisherman make 10,000, probably that's somebody else make 100,000 with those things. And this is international crime, so you need to treat it as international crime. As long as you just put enforcement and ban gill nets, that will not work. This is international crime, and you have to treat it that way if you want to solve the issue.
Indeed, because transnational wildlife crime has other aspects to it that a lot of people aren't often aware of, like the corruption that goes along with it. It then serves to demolish, if you like, structures elsewhere.
And you have organized crime doing that. I mean, drug dealers are the ones who are trafficking totoaba. And I mean, they have a lot of expertise doing those things, sadly.
I understand you actually attended last year's CITES meeting, and that you, while there, submitted a critical scientific review of Mexico's compliance action plan. Other than the aspects you discussed earlier, could you tell us about any other flaws you identified in the plan?
Yeah, I think that was my first CITES meeting ever. It's a bit surprising how it works. It's really intense, and understanding how the papers move and come back. It's complicated, but I was happy to see that there is a lot of interest from most member parties to protect vaquita. My only disappointment is that, and I can understand in an international organization how that works, but Mexico makes a report to CITES, and CITES assumes, without contrasting in the field or without verifying with other parties, that what the government is saying is true. And this brings us back to alternative gear. So you read the report, it's like if alternative gear is ready to be used, it's commercially viable, and that's not true. And the Secretariat of CITES take it as a fact that things are working properly. Now, one important thing that happened at that CITES meeting is there was a vote, and we have a mission of CITES, and a very good mission CITES, because the General Secretary of CITES participated in this mission to the US. They would go to China, and they were in Mexico. So they were able to see how things really look like in Mexico. But this is how things work in Mexico. And I told this to CITES. The Mexican enforcement officers called a meeting with fishermen, and they told them, don't use gill nets while the CITES mission is in Mexico, because this will work against you and there will be sanctions. And so no one was out fishing when the CITES mission was there. So it was this, I don't know what's the word in English, but you put a stage and actors and all those things.
Yeah. You basically present the appearance of what you want to be reality, even if it's actually not.
Yeah, and then I am sure that the mission of CITES met with fishermen in private, and the truth must have emerged there, because and this is not the first time Mexico tries to lie to an international organization. They did that with IWC in the 90s. They told that all gill nets for totoaba were confiscated and the commercial fisheries were closed and the vaquita would recover. That never happened. So this is like a modus operandi, at least.
Yeah, it's unfortunately not alone in that respect either, in presenting kind of information to CITES that appears to be a bit questionable, but also faithful to itself.
But I think the good news, and the best news we have had so far in all my years with vaquita, is these anti-gill net devices being deployed. At least it buys us time. And we cannot say for sure right now, but the surveys we did in 2021 and 2023, the population doesn't seem to be, vaquita's population, declining as bad as it was declining some years ago. We cannot say it's stable or it's going up or down, but at least it's not declining to a 90% or half of the population being disappeared in a few years. So that's, I think, good news. And also, we know that vaquita, despite their small population size, they would recover. Even from 10 animals, they would recover if we stop killing them immediately.
Yeah, that was brings me to a question I was going to ask later on, but I might as well pose it now, which is that even if the illegal fishing would stop right now, a lot of people, and I probably count myself amongst them, would think that 10 is a very small number to kickstart a population back from the brink. Is that a viable number for the vaquita to recover from? Are they genetically diverse enough?
Yeah. So we had 3 papers. The first one we wrote was, 20 years ago. And we argued that vaquita could recover. They are not doomed to extinction because of their genetic makeup. And then we had another paper that was led by a brilliant scientist from San Diego. And you see that genetic variability is distributed homogeneously through the whole genome. So that means that vaquita lost their bad genes or the lethal genes years ago, or hundreds of years ago. So what they have now is what they need to survive. I don't. These are the lethal alerts were purged, or purged. I think is the word in English. And then the most recent paper that was published in Science and led by 3 young, very good geneticists, one from Mexico. After modeling the different scenarios, it is clear that vaquita, despite having only 10 animals, and as I said, if they stop killing them, they will recover. So the genetic makeup they have right now is the one they need to survive in that area. So it's good news that, and this is not only vaquita, we have seen other very small populations survive with very little genetic variability, or even less than vaquita, which is a lot to say. And that's the channel foxes from the US. And they have lethal alleles, and they are still there. But vaquita doesn't have that, and it's still there. So that's good news. And I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
Yeah, that's most encouraging.
And
I'm always tempted to end on that note.
And the most recent surveys, I believe calves were seen as well. So, that's also promising and a reason for optimism.
Yeah, every survey we do, we see calves, and they look healthy. We have some idea how unhealthy small cetaceans look like. And in this case, animals look very healthy, adults and calves. So yeah, that's
on the basis level, they just need to be left alone to do their thing and make their numbers grow again.
Yeah, we say vaquita is a very resourceful animal. If you stop killing them, they will thrive and come back.
And Sarah, as a campaigner of considerable experience, what do you think needs to happen now to give these last vaquita a fighting chance until we can reach a point where, say, the kind of new fishing materials that are being discussed by Lorenzo can be put into effect? What do we need? What needs to happen, if you like, to buy them that time they need?
Well, the conservation impact of the ongoing illegal gillnet fishing for totoaba is clear from what Lorenzo has told us. The vaquitas simply won't survive if the fishing ban is not fully enforced. So that's what the Mexican government need to do, enforce the ban, because if the gillnet fishing stops, the bycatch stops. There are some other steps that will help to disrupt the totoaba trade. As Lorenzo says, the Mexican government also needs to invest in and provide the fishers with alternative gears and licenses, which would preserve the fishers' livelihoods and the vaquitas. And then from a transnational trade perspective, the enforcement agencies in the countries where totoaba is transiting and being traded need to work together in a robust way. And they need to work with the transport companies, banks, and other industries that can help to understand and prevent the individuals that are involved in the trade. And this collaborative approach is necessary because, as we discussed earlier, wildlife crime, human trafficking, money laundering, drug smuggling are all undertaken by the same criminal groups. And so, linked to that, an increase in criminal penalties for wildlife trafficking would also be a positive step. And the report that we produced recently focused to some extent on social media, and social media platforms also have a really important role to play. They need to stop allowing adverts for wildlife that it's illegal to trade on their platforms. So those would be a few of the ways that I think we could give vaquita a fighting chance.
Given that so many of the most commonly used social media platforms are largely owned by a handful of the same billionaires, has any attempt been made to reach out to them to say, why don't you have like a zero tolerance policy, or have we had any feedback from them?
We did reach out to both WeChat and Facebook after the release of our report. We spoke to the legal team in WeChat, and we've provided them with our evidence, and so that dialogue has begun, and we don't know where that will end just yet. We haven't managed to make contact with the right people in Facebook, but we remain keen, and that data will make its way into the right hands, hopefully, if we can find the right contacts. And yeah, we just wait to see how that transpires. I think what we need, though, is a policy that's effective in preventing these adverts from coming online in the first place, so that we're not hunting out the cases and sending individual cases to these social media platforms, because that's a very ineffective way to operate.
Absolutely. Are they more actually advertised as what they are, unlike, say, eBay, where ivory was advertised as like cowbone for some years, or other alternative descriptors like that, which people kind of in the know understood meant to mean ivory, even though it's advertised as bone. Do you find a similar thing in social media with totoaba more? Is it advertised as something a bit less inflammatory?
Sometimes it's nondescript. Sometimes they're advertised, it's not clear that they're for sale. Often you have to directly message the individuals that having the adverts online. There are often the same individuals that reoccur, and without digging too deep, it's quite easy to see where the sales are happening. Often the moors are only available online for a short time and they disappear, so we assume that they're being sold. It's a challenge.
All the best of luck with it, and more power to your arm.
Let me say something here, because I think it's what Sarah was saying is really important. Even if vaquita is endemic from Mexico, you need international cooperation to prevent the extinction of vaquita or any other animal. Now, conservation is an international thing. It has no borders, no frontiers. And you need the collaboration of all the countries to do that. And one thing that when you asked CITES, and I was just remembering, not only you need CITES to come every 2 or 3 or 4 years, or you need to have from CITES some kind of group that monitors regularly the progress of Mexico and any other country. And I know this implies resources, but you need a group that has to follow up all the recommendations from CITES or IWC to make sure they're being taken into consideration and applied and implemented in each country. And I think in that sense, it's every successful conservation programs need the support of public opinion. And that's, I think, communications is a key thing, like what we're doing right now here.
And there's another reason why this issue needs to be aired, and that's because it's not just restricted to totoaba and vaquita. What we're seeing is that more is in so much demand that now other species of large croaker fish in different parts of the world are also being fished and they're a bycatch of other critically endangered species. Some of them are dolphins, some of them are sharks and turtles, but this issue is not going away. And so it's very important for us to focus on it and to bring it to people's attention.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both very much indeed for your time today and chat to you. It's been fascinating. And I do hope you can both come back in the next year, perhaps, or maybe sooner. And we'll have even better news for people about how the vaquita is doing. But yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Paul.
If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please watch this space for future episodes and do check out our website at eia-international.org to find out more about our work. Thank you very much for joining us, and wherever you are, stay safe out there.